If you've played Dungeons & Dragons before, chances are that you've experienced items like the Flame Tongue weapons, the Rings of Protections, and the Bags of Holding. But D&D is a game filled with a plethora of magic items with a range purposes much wider than the commonly found +1 weapons. Some of these items can warp the very fabric of reality and bend enemies to your will, and others might just create 2 gallons of mayonnaise. Like I said, it's a wide range. So today, we're going to be going over 5 really fun and unique, lesser-known magic items in D&D 5e. And before I actually jump in, I have done a couple of these videos before in the past and put them in the description below in case the kind of content is interesting to you. As always, if you have any items that you think are underrated, please leave a comment below, and who knows, I might actually put them in my next video. But with that out of the way, let's get to it. The first item I have on my list is arguably one of the strangest items, I think? The reason for the confusion is that it's labeled as a magic item, but it is also technically an organism too, which kind of confuses me, but anyways, that's going to be the earworm. Yep, yeah, it sounds pretty weird, I get it, but honestly, this is one of the most unique items that I have ever featured in a video. Specifically because this is a symbiont, I don't actually know how to pronounce that word, but essentially it requires attunement by burrowing into your freaking skull and bonding to the inside of your head. Yeah, it's weird as hell. But while you're attuned to this item, you can speak, read, and write deep speech and cast spells on a charged system. These spells, or this earworm rather, holds 4 charges which can be used to cast Detect Thoughts for 2 charges or Dissonant Whispers for 1 charge with a spell save DC of 15 for both that recharge a d4 daily. Now if you've ever watched any of my videos before, you've no doubt come across my love for Detect Thoughts, but essentially it allows you to read the thoughts of another creature. Dissonant Whispers, on the other hand, is a first level spell that allows you to whisper an unsettling melody to a creature within 60 feet, and that creature must succeed on a DC 15 Wisdom saving throw or take 3d6 damage and have to use their reaction to get as far away from you as freaking possible. If they succeed on the throw, they only take half damage and don't need to run away using their reaction. Now, aside from the wasted reaction, the reason Dissonant Whispers is really effective is because it causes psychic damage, which is very rarely resisted by monsters. However, it's not all good news, as you may have very intelligently guessed when I mentioned that it burrows into your skull. Earworm cannot be removed while you are attuned to it by any other means aside from an effect that removes a curse. On top of that, there's a tiny little line in there that states, each time you use the earworm's Detect Thoughts ability, it sends that information gleaned to the nearest Dalkir, or the next nearest earworm until it reaches a Dalkir. Now, if you don't know what a Dalkir is, I don't blame you. Really, honestly, I didn't know what it was until I made the video. But essentially, Dalkirs are also known as Lords of Madness. They are incredibly powerful creatures that invaded Eberron with an army of other foul aberrations such as Mind Flayers and Beholders. Yeah, that's right, they essentially led an invasion where the soldiers were Mind Flayers and Beholders. If that wasn't bad enough, the Dalkir also like to reshape the world in their image. And while this isn't a video about Dalkir, just to give you an idea of how bad that is, here's an image of some things that they like to make. Yeah, it's pretty messed up. So yeah, the earworm is pretty cool and gives you some really neat abilities, but just be aware that you may unknowingly be feeding some of the most dangerous creatures in the world very important information that you might not necessarily want to share. But you know what? That's totally up to your DM anyways. Moving on to number 2, the Ring of X-Ray Vision. Chances are that you already guessed what this item does, but since YouTube is weird and I need to meet the YouTube algorithm requirements of video length, let me explain. While attuned to this ring, you can speak the command word and see through solid matter for 1 minute. Your vision is limited to 30 feet and varies based upon the material you're trying to see through. It can penetrate up to 1 inch of metal, 1 foot of stone, 3 feet of wood or dirt, or anything past that. Anything thicker than that blocks the vision, as does a thin sheet of lead. You can use this multiple times per day, however, if you use it more than once, then you must succeed on a DC 15 Constitution saving throw or take a level of exhaustion. So realistically, you can use this item a few times per day depending upon how confident you are with your Constitution saves. And while this item doesn't necessarily give you any combat bonuses, the amount of information gathered from something like this kind of really makes up for that attunement slot in my opinion. The average brick is about 9 inches long, meaning that the ring easily can see through brick walls and buildings and far exceeds the requirement for wooden ones. And not to mention, think about the amount of times you could use this item for not just seeing through walls. Sure, you can see through walls and doors, but it gives you X-ray vision of everything within 30 feet of you. What about, I don't know, looking inside a box or chest to see what's inside? Taking a look behind a shopkeep's counter to know if he has any hidden weapons or magic items that he didn't tell you about? Casually looking in somebody's bag or coin purse to see what they got in there? Or even see what's going on above or below you? Imagine looking for someone that you believe is being held captive, or, you know, knowing of like an underground thieves guild that runs out of an inn. Just use your x-ray vision, look on down, and you'll probably see a couple of them playing cards right under your noses. Not only that, but take this ring out of town, and what might you be able to see in dungeons? Being able to see through walls and doors grants you a lot of information and a lot of safety to see potential threats. See a sleeping dragon in the next room? Let's probably find another door. And I would argue that knowing what you're up against and being well prepared for anything that you're going into is much more helpful than a simple combat bonus. So yeah, you can go ahead and take your fancy weapons, your wands of fireball, and I'll be over here with my ring and tell my party about what's going on. Yeah. Moving on to number 3, we have the Wind Fan. While holding this fan, you can use your action to cast Gust of Wind. The spell has a DC 13 save and can be used multiple times per day, however each time past the first grants a cumulative 20% chance to tear and break the item. Gust of Wind is a 2nd level spell that creates a 60-foot, 10-foot wide blast of wind that lasts for a minute. Any creature that starts its turn in that blast must succeed a DC 13 strength save or be pushed back 15 feet. Movement through the area is also halved, and wind disperses gas, vapors, and puts out unprotected flames. And you can also use your bonus action on latter turns to change the direction of the wind. Now I know Gust of Wind is not a very exciting spell, but it does have a couple of really helpful uses aside from dispersing poison gas or putting out fires. Think about it, right? You're in a dungeon being pursued by a group of enemies. You run out of the room, up the stairs, down the hallway, and into a larger room. Normally, one might think to barricade the door, however, you have the Wind Fan. Once you get to the end of the corridor, you turn around, use the Wind Fan, right down the hallway, and now those enemies pursuing you have to get through 60 foot of essentially difficult terrain with a decent chance to automatically get pushed back 15 feet at the end of their turn. Meanwhile, you have all of your ranged classes shooting arrows, slinging spells, all from a highly defended choke point into that room. Now, aside from the very low probability of anyone actually making it that far, in case someone actually does, have your fighter buddy stand in the doorway and make attacks against anything that actually does make it that far. And then if you really want to be mean, just push them back in and start the whole cycle over again, and hopefully they'll tumble right back into the blender. So yeah, it might not be the most exciting item, but it definitely has its uses. Moving on to number 4, we have another unique item known as the Robe of Eyes. Yeah, you heard me right, the Robe of Eyes, like eyes. This robe is adorned with a pattern of a bunch of eyes and gives you a bunch of benefits. The first benefit is that you have an advantage on perception checks that rely on sight. The second benefit is that you can see in all directions. I mean, it's called the Robe of Eyes and it has eyes all over it. It's kinda in the name. Benefit 3 is it grants you dark vision up to 120 feet. Not the craziest benefit, since practically every race in 5th edition has dark vision, but 120 feet is very nice. Benefit 4 is you can see invisible creatures and objects. And just to clarify, all for perpetuity while you're wearing this robe. You don't need to cast anything, you don't need to do anything, this is just all the time. So you can see anything by default, whether or not it's invisible, in darkness, or whatever. And finally, benefit 5 allows you to see into the freaking ethereal plane for 120 feet around you. Now I know what you're thinking, what does that do for me? And I gotta be honest, I'm not entirely sure off the top of my head, but it could definitely be useful. But to be fair, that is a lot of benefits for a single item, there's gotta be a catch, right? And yeah, there kinda is. While wearing this robe, you cannot avert your eyes because you can see all around you, and simply closing your eyes doesn't end your vision since you've got them all over your cloak. Because of this, you can find yourself in trouble with enemies or effects relying on your sight. But more so than that, if someone casts light or daylight within 5 feet of your robe, then you are blinded for an entire minute. You can make a con save at the end of your turn to end the blinding for an 11 DC of light or a 15 DC of daylight, but honestly, I think that kind of makes sense. If you have blasted daylight into your eyes, it's kind of makes sense. Ever hold a flashlight up to your eye? First of all, don't try that, but it's definitely not comfortable and can blind you. So imagine that, but like times 100. And that's the Robe of Eyes. Pretty cool item, lots of cool uses, spooky as hell. And finally, we have our 5th item, the Cube of Force. Now, this is one of those items that no one ever thinks about, but I think it's super cool. The cube is only about an inch across and has unique markings on each side, kind of similar to a die. You can press one of these markings on any side of the die for a unique effect for a certain amount of charges, which I think totals about 36 charges that recharge a D20 every day. Each of these markings creates a variation of a 15-foot cube barrier around the individual using the item. Since there is no roll associated with this, you can kind of specify whatever you want it to do. For 1 charge, the barrier prevents gases, wind, and fog from passing through. For 2 charges, the barrier prevents non-living matters from passing through. For 3 charges, it prevents living matter from passing through. For 4 charges, spell effects cannot pass through. And for 5 charges, nothing can pass through that barrier. And just to clarify, you can allow walls, floors, ceilings to pass through on the barrier at your discretion. So I really don't think I need to explain why I love this item. But just to clarify, as a player, I love this item. As a DM, I hate it and I would never give it to my players because it's bananas. Being able to prevent anything from reaching you is so unbelievably strong, not to mention that a 15-foot radius around you means that you can essentially protect your entire party for an entire minute from all sources. Ugh, I just get a headache thinking about it as a DM. Don't do it to yourself, it's not worth it. But anyways, that is 5 unique and fun magic items in D&D 5e. Like I said earlier, I have done similar videos to this in the past, and I linked those in the description below, so if you're interested, go check those out. Also, I would love to hear what kind of cool and unique items you've gotten in your games, and I always reply to comments. So if you've got any, please put them in the comments below, and who knows, I might even feature them in the next video. But with that all being said, thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you on Friday.